I think we're live right now. So let's just jump into it. And here's Mike. Mike, thank you for joining us today. Everybody, Gregory, Samir, Liz. So I'll start us off with some quick welcome remarks and then give an opportunity for everyone to introduce themselves. This is a live panel discussion on how to overcome large language model hallucination in large-scale customer support. To introduce this topic, let's take a step back in time to November 30th, 2022, when OpenAI first released ChatGPT to the public. Believe it or not, that was only 7 months and 24 days ago. When ChatGPT was released, the capability of this technology shocked the world. It has inspired business leaders across all industries to find ways to harness this technology to improve operations. But the single industry at the forefront of this technological shift is customer support. Every year, hundreds of billions of dollars are spent by companies in the effort to communicate with their customers. But even with such massive investment, most companies are still falling short of meeting their customers' expectations. Large language models like ChatGPT have the potential for both decreasing the cost and improving the quality of large-scale customer support. But there are a few major roadblocks to achieving this goal. And perhaps the most significant of these roadblocks is the issue of hallucination. That is the current tendency of large language models to state false information as fact. And before a company can unlock the potential of this technology, you have to overcome this because no one can tolerate this in the customer support context. And that is why today I'm very excited to have 4 of the leading minds from 4 companies that are taking the charge and helping enterprises use large language model in the customer support context. So let's begin with a round of introductions. My name is John Walter. I'm the host of the CX, AI, and Outsourcing Podcast. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of ZMAXINC. Our company has been advising large enterprises on the selection of human agent outsource vendors for 27 years. And today, our work requires us to also be experts on the use of artificial intelligence in customer support. So, Greg, how about you go next and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Gregory Whiteside. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Humanfirst. So Humanfirst is a data productivity suite for natural language data. You can think of it a bit like Excel for working with natural language data. So we help teams launch high-quality AI custom models that power business insights, automation, and CX experiences. And so we help teams by providing the fastest way to build custom AI models with their data. And increasingly with large language models, we're applying the same data-centric workflows to help build custom prompts that you can trust.
Very cool. Samir?
Hi, everybody. Glad to be on the show. I'm Samir, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Flair. And what we do at Flair is we help to extract custom information from conversation data and other unstructured data using LLMs, and then build workflows on top of that to streamline internal operations like auto-updating CRMs, ticket creation, and drafting personalized emails.
Cool. Mike?
Conversation data and other unstructured data using LLMs, and then build workflows on top of that. I don't know what.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened.
We've got the ghost of Samir also here.
Yeah.
Yeah. All cool.
That's so Samir's AI, actually. That's the new product. That's the new product launch.
We're beta testing it right now. Voice AI.
Yeah, you saw it here first. Hey, great to be here, everybody. I'm Mike. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Ada. Ada envisions a future where every customer interaction is resolved by AI. And today, we power billions of customer service interactions through our AI that are automatically resolved for some of the leading brands around the world. These are digital-first brands that are embracing an AI-first future with regards to their customer service. And our mandate really at Ada is to help businesses transition from a human-first approach to customer service to an AI-first approach to customer service. And so this issue today is certainly one that we are very familiar with, and I'm excited to get into it with all of you around how we're all collaborating to improve the quality of customer service for our customers with LLMs. And I'll also give a little plug that I'm a very proud Humanfirst customer. We all are at Ada ourselves.
Thanks, very cool. Liz, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah. Hey, folks. I'm Liz Tsai. I'm CEO at High Operator, where we're essentially building a next generation BPO, except instead of being staffed by all humans, we're really staffed by more cyborg agents, if you will. We leverage our proprietary customer support engine. We call it HiQ, leverages generative AI to tackle even the most complex customer requests. So really, we use a mix of, automation, workflow automation, humans in the loop, as well as generative AI on the front end to essentially help customers and clients and consumer brands augment their customer service efforts.
Very cool. And I just want to let everyone know that if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the comments. I see people have already been making a few comments, which is awesome. Glad it's working. The first question is, can we access the recording? And the answer is yes. This will be recorded and published as an upcoming episode on the CX, AI, and Outsourcing Podcast. But that might be a few weeks. And so let's jump into this. And also keep in mind, if you have any questions, just go ahead and put them into the feed. And I will circle around at the end. We'll probably have 15 to 20 minutes of answering questions if there are enough questions to justify that amount of time. So we'll jump in. Liz, the first question I have is directed towards you. It's in the context of customer support, how can the risk of hallucination be mitigated without compromising the responsiveness or accuracy of large language models?
Gosh, that's really the big question, isn't it? How do you really bring an anti-hallucination strategy to this application, right? And at High Operator, we think of it a lot in terms of sort of reframing the perspective of what exactly you're asking an LLM to do in the context of customer support, right? Because to some extent, large language models, they don't have a concept of accuracy, right? At most, they have a concept of relevancy to some extent. So you really have to think about, what are you asking the LLM to do when you think about sort of automating customer support? And we think of it as there are three things, right? You can use it in a bunch of different places. One is in comprehension or categorization, right? Understanding what it is that a customer wants. Right? You can also use it to synthesize information. So it might say, hey, here we're going to feed in all of our FAQ responses in historical context, and you want the LLM to then be able to synthesize and come up with information. And then thirdly, you can also be asking an LLM to essentially reframe or rephrase information that you already have. So we think about these three different things that you can ask an LLM to do. 1 and 3 are actually pretty safe. Right? You can use an LLM to comprehend what a customer wants. You can also ask it to, here's information we already know about the customer. Can you reframe and make it very conversational and a very branded manner? These two are safe, right? The second one, we're asking it to synthesize information. This is where, when it comes to hallucinations in the context of customer support, we find ourselves being very intentional, deliberate, and very conservative in terms of keeping the human in the loop in order to make sure that you're not accidentally hallucinating information when synthesizing information. All right, so for us, it's really a question of what are you asking the LLM to do and how safe versus unsafe that is.
Mm-hmm. So, Greg, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this topic. Do you have anything you want to throw in?
Sure. So I think, to the question of how can it be mitigated, I think there's kind of multiple layers that you can apply mitigation to. So I'd start, the first one is kind of the user experience. So in the customer support context, first of all, like humans are the ones interacting with the LLM in this case. So a first kind of basic way to mitigate is to set expectations with the human, make it very clear that they're talking with an AI, and make it clear also that there can be risks of inaccurate information, therefore, so that put it a bit on the human on the other side to kind of understand that they and to expect that this is not another human that has absolute answers. Again, when it comes to the experience for the human, I think that helping understand where information comes from in terms of the LLM response. So kind of the data source attribution, linking back to the original article, FAQ, or part of content that a particular answer was generated from can also help the human understand and kind of confirm whether the information provided back is correct. I think also, again, in the way that you're going to build the experience for the user, I think good experiences for chatbots and automated experiences will often give the user few options, a few different results, and let the human kind of decide on what looks like might be the best answer to the question, or the best flow, like based on what they asked. So like just from a human kind of expectation, I think those are easy wins and things that we're seeing kind of bring good experiences to chatbots and other automations. Then on the way that you architect kind of the LLM itself, I think a really kind of powerful way to harness LLMs but still maintain some form of control is through a hybrid NLU and NLG mechanism, whereby you kind of understand and intercept, if you will, the queries and classify them and decide kind of in runtime whether you want the LLM to completely take over, or whether you want to route and triage that to something that you control. And so there's specific intents, or there's specific routes that you might want to kind of take over and not risk giving to the LLM, especially if they're kind of critical paths. And of course, when you're doing that, you can also give it to the LLM, but provide kind of fine-tuned prompts for those specific paths, and that gives you increased control over the output. And then of course, I think that there's obvious ways that you can improve the performance of the LLM to mitigate risks of hallucinations. So you can fine-tune models on your data, and I think that you're going to go into those types of questions later on. You can also apply post-processing to the answer coming back to the LLM, and I think that's another part of kind of the discussion later on. But intercepting the response back and making sure that it, as much as you can detect, doesn't contain any hallucinations is doable. Kind of, we see two ways of doing that. One is with NLU. So if the response is something that's quite simple and kind of can be captured with semantic similarity, often making sure that the response is what you expect can be used or can be done with an NLU classifier. But increasingly, I think that the use of LLM models to monitor and to ensure that the output is correct is going to be kind of the scalable route. And finally, I think that in terms of making sure the model itself and the data that you're using helps mitigate hallucinations, we see retrieval augmented generation. So kind of the process by which you take your existing data set, embed it, and then use that data with a prompt to bring back data is obviously kind of the way that you can ensure as much as possible that the LLM is using your own data, and therefore reducing the types of hallucinations that you would have if you're not effectively applying the LLM to your custom data set.
I have a series of questions about what you just said, Greg, but we don't have time to go through them all. So I'm going to stick to the script. But for everybody on this show, there's a standing invitation to come on the podcast that I put on just for more in-depth conversations about. In particular, I'd love to have a better understanding of the distinction between NLU and NLG. It's my understanding, it's natural language understanding and natural language guidance, and the relationship between those two, and how to implement. So, but I'll keep the mic with the smarter people in the room. So Mike Murchison, can you share your thoughts about how Ada is approaching this issue of hallucination, in particular, without compromising the responsiveness or the accuracy of the large language model?
Sure. So I think, look, my perspective on this is that hallucination is a misnomer. And I think it's really critical to understand the relationship, like to understand what a hallucination even is. I think Greg teed this up nicely by grounding many of his risk mitigation strategies in the expectation setting we can formulate with customers. But the reality is that a hallucination is really governed or dictated by a failure to meet expectations. And there's a real risk, I believe, in overcorrecting hallucination risk. In other words, a hallucination is a mistake, but the underlying technology that is producing a hallucination let me frame this differently. A hallucination is a mistake, but when hallucinations work, we call them creativity. And it's really important if you're going to deliver a customer experience that's truly extraordinary. And this is certainly what we're focused on at Ada. And I think what the true potential for AI and customer service is the opportunity to make customer service experiences extraordinary for everyone. I think it's really important that we understand that how to harness the creativity that hallucinations represent while mitigating the errors that they can also represent simultaneously. And I think it's very easy to over correct. Now, so you might ask, how do we overcorrect? How do we prevent ourselves from overcorrecting? Well, the first thing I think we would need to appreciate is that these models are far more capable than most people realize. And so it's important that we don't overly correct prematurely, and that we, I believe, take advantage of the full capability of the model to provide the highest quality of customer experience, again, without undermining without undermining the experience itself. Now, I think that Greg also mentioned a couple of words that are really significant in this regard. Control was a big thing you mentioned. For me, the essence of this conversation is less about how do we prevent errors in content generation, and more about how do we build a system that enables brands to control their AI. Control requires, in addition to set of tools that enable you to touch and feel your AI, requires transparency into how these generations are created. And it requires, I would add a third, continuous improvement. And it's going to be the businesses that are able to control their AI, get a window into what their AI is thinking, and then are enabled with the tools that allow them continuously improve the performance of their AI. Those are going to be the brands that fundamentally cross this chasm that we face as an industry right now between being digital companies and being AI companies. And I think all of us and all the audience in the world who are considering and deploying new customer service experiences, we need to go back internally and to our companies and figure out what our strategy is to become an AI native organization. And it's this shift that I think is actually just as profound as the shift from the previous generation, where all the brick and mortar businesses need to figure out how to become digital. So I guess to summarize, to me, it's about, you can't talk about hallucinations without talking about control, transparency, and continuous improvement.
Very good. Very good. Samir, do you have some thoughts you want to contribute on this topic?
Yeah, a few thoughts. So I like how Mike set it up with, the key is really about control, being able to control AI. And, that's some of the stuff that we're working on at Flair. So what we think is the means to control AI is actually through evaluation. So evaluation is the ability of a system to be able to evaluate continuously the outputs of an LLM. And at Flair, we basically have built an experimentation platform for these LLMs. So, for example, for any given task, whether that's generation, whether that's categorization or classification, being able to basically set up these evaluation metrics that allow you to compare what the output of the LLM was with what some ground truth data would be, allows you to continuously refine the models, try different techniques for prompts, try different techniques for retrieval augmented generation, try different research methods that are sort of state of the art in improving the accuracy of these models, try different fine-tuning methods, try different models. There's so many parameters that go into these LLM models that can be tweaked and sort of fine-tuned. And really the key is that every task has its own specific data, and and potentially will require its own custom model with custom configurations to achieve the highest accuracy. And so having an evaluation framework that lets you evaluate what your configurations are, and then go back and then tune those configurations for your task, will effectively allow you to have the highest concrete form of accuracy. and also mitigate the risk of hallucination. So that's how we're viewing it at Flair.
Hey, Samir, have you done any benchmarking against human contact centers? In terms of inform, like specifically comparing the accuracy of a human contact center to some of the results that you and your customers are seeing with LLMs?
So we actually haven't yet worked on that task, but that's something that we enable through our experimentation platform. So being able to basically provide a data set of human responses and a data set of LLM responses, and then make various comparisons between the two. There's various metrics out there. One of them is, semantic similarity between the LLM output and the human output. Another might be relevance. I think Greg might have touched on that, relevance of the output to the context that was provided to the LLM, and several other sort of evaluation metrics that could be useful in that sense to give you a quantitative, representation of how well the LLM is working. Yeah.
So a quick note there, Mike, actually. So we A/B test all of our automated work streams, human versus AI generated. We see very similar accuracy across both when things are set up properly. But CSAT is actually the metric where we see the biggest uplift. We're finding that CSAT is consistently 5 to 10% higher on the AI generated augmented work streams versus the human only.
That's a great comparison point. Yeah, I imagine, John, you've got some data looking at this too. The reason I bring up the question is because I think it's really easy to forget just how inconsistent human-powered customer service is. Mm-hmm. And I think it's valuable for us to ground each other in like a clear benchmark for the experience we're trying to achieve. And the reality is that humans are not that good at providing a consistent customer experience, nor are human contact centers that good at providing a particularly accurate customer experience. And so implicit in so many conversations about hallucinations is an expectation that 100% accuracy, 100% consistency is actually the goal. And while I think that's a great aspiration and certainly achievable, it's also so far away from the reality of the human first paradigm that governs most of customer service today.
And that's a good point. And when it comes to trying to achieve 100% accuracy, what is the risk when it comes to the hampering of the quality of the output of the large language model? Is that a big risk? I'm throwing that out to everybody.
I think it is a risk. It's certainly something to be attuned to, but it's also not a new risk. It's exorbitantly expensive to train a contact center, and you know this better than all of us here, John, to provide a consistent experience, to train 1,000 reps to answer the same question the same way. And, certainly the cost of doing that as a result of large language models and generative AI are falling precipitously. So I think it's not to say that inaccuracies in generations aren't a risk. They certainly are. But my point is just that the business context in which this technology is deployed, I think, needs to be considered in particular. And in many environments we're entering, the experience isn't particularly consistent to begin with. So I think there's actually improvements in consistency that can be introduced by virtue of the right generative AI solutions, above and beyond what we see in environments that don't have any generative AI at all.
Yeah, I've got a general question that anyone can answer here. It's when I'm talking with customer support leaders who are traditionally handling human agent support. They usually have an in-house team, and then they're managing an one or multiple outsourced vendors. The biggest fear I hear about large language models is not some minor inaccuracy, like you get a fact wrong about a product or service, but rather that something egregious would be said. And, something that's highly offensive that someone could take a screenshot of and circulate around Twitter, and then that customer support leader could lose their job. Is that a realistic or reasonable fear considering the current advancements, or is that just totally unreasonable and should be discredited and disregarded altogether?
I'd say it's a risk. I'd say it's probably like that type of egregious output is what the LLM vendors are, working natively to prevent like within the model. So, hate speech, things that are like very obviously wrong. I think there's different techniques and ways that they're going to be implementing filters. I mean, that's already the case, but you can hack out of those filters. I think, anyone who's motivated enough will find ways to, hack an LLM and to give it a prompt or an input that will, output something bad. At the same time, at some point, it's becoming, it's a bit like you open developer tools in Chrome and you go and you change, the content of a website locally. At some point, like, you don't own the LLM. So as a customer support vendor, if you're relying on something that's becoming a commodity almost, right? And where that thing has, barriers and things built in to prevent that type of speech, I don't feel like long-term it's going to even feel like that much of a responsibility of a customer support leader if somebody manages to hack through and to get it to say something really bad. I mean, I think that's going to become kind of expected in a way, and it's the price, in my opinion, to pay to use like this commodity that everyone is going to have access to. But I know not everyone would agree with that.
Yeah, so I mean, I have a point there. I mean, I do think that is a valid concern, and I agree totally that the LLMs are natively trying to prevent this, and everybody's kind of in a race to reduce the hallucinations, improve the accuracy, and there's so many different models now that are coming out. Many of them open source, many of them managed, and so. I mean, I do think that the risk of this sort of egregious output is going to decrease over time and pretty rapidly. But at the same time, I think, for any business or any company that is adopting LLM-based solutions from any of the vendors, it's actually really critical to have some guardrails that are put in place over the output of the LLM, being able to, make sure that the outputs of the LLM conform to a specific format, for example, which can be done through the prompt, making sure that, the output from the LLM, no matter what prompt was injected by, say, a user, is moderated or filtered for, egregious content. So making sure that there's like a final check before sending the response out, at least for those really bad cases. And what are some ways that you could do that final sort of filtration or content check? There's sort of, several open source content moderation AI that many of them don't even depend on LLMs actually, that are pretty good. And then the other approach is, this is a bit controversial, but using another LLM to basically filter the output of the LLM to make sure that there wasn't some sort of really bad message being sent out.
Mm-hmm. So the next question I'm going to direct to Liz is it's related to this topic. So we're going to jump a little bit from the original agenda, which is how can you guarantee the accuracy of LLM responses, especially in industries where precision is critical and hallucination could have significant consequences?
Yeah, so customer service is what we like to think of internally as kind of a high risk, low reward application, right? Like there's a lot of things that can go wrong when you allow people to say a model to say anything. And, the expectation is you get it correct. So there's not necessarily a giant high five when you generate the return label correctly. Right. And so we think a lot of that comes down to having a lot of precision around where you leverage LLMs, how strong the guardrails are versus the space for creativity, as Mike kind of brought up previously. And then, also be careful with information synthesis using evaluator models like I think Samir just mentioned here. But particularly when we think about, what a customer service response and process looks like, right? There are parts of this process where there is only one right answer. That might be, hey, what is the price adjustment amount? What is the actual return policy, right? There's only one correct answer there. And there are parts of the customer service interaction where there are many correct answers, right? An example of that might be, hey, the workflow's gone and processed the price adjustment, it's applied the policy, now it just needs to be communicated back to the customer. In that communication, there are many correct ways and great ways to tell the customer that you've processed a refund, here's the policy, here's sort of a conversational response back. And in places where there really is only one correct answer, that's where we say you need really strong guardrails for whatever that workflow automation process looks like, right? That is where you should probably limit creativity to some extent, because you just want to make sure that either the FAQ response is generated correctly or you're applying the policy correctly, right? That's where you need to be really strong about that. And that's also where you need to be really careful and require a really high degree of confidence, run that evaluator model. And then other places where, hey, you've already done everything. You have the list of, we call it facts, of what's happened and list of what the customer's account information is. And you're just trying to create sort of the final conversational filter and response back to the customer. That's where you let LLMs really do their thing. Here's where you're supposed to say LLM. Here's sort of we fine-tuned it to your brand voice. Take that, run it through that LLM, communicate it back. That's where we find we can really have the greatest impact, because you're not giving the model free rein to synthesize anything and everything. You're really saying, here's the one targeted approach. And that's where we see sort of the greatest uplift on things like CSAT, where Justin, I think you had a question in there. We do control for response time when we look at the CSAT impact. And the CSATs we're looking at there are from the customer. So it's a third party, it's a clean measurement there. But because accuracy is so important, we find that you really need to be careful what you ask the LLM to do, have strong human-in-the-loop controls when needed, and then measure the output there.
Very good. Mike, I'm interested to hear how Ada is approaching this issue where it's one of those circumstances where creativity is less appreciated.
Sure. So our approach is twofold. First, we give our customers exceptionally clear measurement of their AI's impact on their customer service. And then second, we give them the technology, the enablement, and the strategy to continuously improve that value over time. So most of our customers are starting with clear measurement, and then over time, they dramatically improve the number of conversations or percentage of conversations they're automatically resolving. On the measurement front, we've introduced a metric that we call automated resolution. And we believe this is the best way to understand the quality of your customer service AI. And the reason we say that is because we've benchmarked this measure against human annotations of customer service conversations, which our company's been doing for like 7 years. And the quality of this AI measure of customer service is now exceeding human capabilities. So think of this as like, we have AI that can read an MRI more accurately than a doctor. We now have AI that can understand a customer service conversation more accurately than a human. And so this measure, automated resolution, what is it? It is a conversation between a business and a customer that's relevant, that is accurate, and that is safe, and does not involve a human agent. So everything we do in our company is in service of maximizing automated resolution, like literally everything, not just our product, but like everything. And increasingly, all our billing and commercial agreements with our customers are connected to automated resolution too. So I guess the short answer, John, is that we put our money where our mouth is, and we align everything to a very, very high quality bar when it comes to the quality of customer service that's coming from Ada's AI. And we give our customers the tools to improve the number of conversations over time that are meeting that same quality bar.
Very good. Greg, do you want to contribute some thoughts on how Humanfirst is handling LLM generation when precision is critical and hallucination could have significant consequences?
Yeah, sure. I think what Mike just said is really interesting, the automated resolution score, because that's another way or another type of content that you're relying on the LLM to kind of output, and you want to trust that type of score. And so, the way we see hallucinations, I think at Humanfirst, is really broadly any type of quality issue that you want to prevent from happening when using an LLM, right? So, of course, like the response that an LLM gives back to a customer is one type of hallucination, or sorry, errors in a response that the LLM would give back is considered a hallucination. But in the case of wanting to evaluate, let's say, conversations that happen like with this automated resolution, you're entrusting an LLM to basically determine whether a conversation was successful or not, based on kind of very biased, on a biased observation of a conversation, right? And I'm presuming, Mike, that depending on the type of customer you have, like the way that you would evaluate whether a conversation was successful or successfully automated might change a bit. So the preventing kind of quality issues across the board, we think really requires basically a lot of testing of your prompts and of your LLM against data, against your real life data, and making sure that the output is what you expect. And I think Mike said it, and I really agree, like starting from a human labeled data set that tells you, what the AI should be outputting, and comparing it against that is a really good starting point. And this is increasingly important as we see, models becoming less reliable in a sense. Like OpenAI just announced that they were deprecating models, and we see a lot of people now wondering whether models like GPT-4 are drifting and weakening in terms of performance. Like the ability to ensure that what you expect the LLM to give back is continuously, good. I think is a core part of solving this problem of hallucinations. And so, for us, it's really about making it really easy to take your existing data and to apply it to prompts and to fine-tune prompts and to test, a bit like Samir was saying as well. So experimenting and getting to a point where you have prompts and output that are perfect, not for like a handful of examples, but for hundreds. And that's much like coding, where you have regression tests and where you're sure that you've run it through kind of the long tail of potential inputs. That is, I think, a core component to working and to ensuring that LLMs, as much as possible, aren't hallucinating because you've tested them in the field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to add on that, I think that's a really great point. I think the real key here for anybody that's looking into adopting LLMs is to have this experimentation and evaluation framework that's very easy to use. Because one of the challenges that, at least that we've noticed, that many companies face when trying to deploy LLMs is actually the sort of engineering work to go ahead and not only, number one, deploy that, but then anytime you make a change, having to revalidate the whole pipeline, change the whole sort of configuration, and deploy a new system is quite challenging. So to improve the speed and efficiency that these experiments are run, it's important that that an organization has this framework that allows you to easily change prompts, allows you to easily change a model. So you're not just relying on GPT 3.5 or GPT 4, but you can also experiment with Claude, with Bard, with open source models, and being able to experiment with all these sort of things that can potentially improve the accuracy of your overall system. And then touching on that too, just as in standard engineering practices, there's usually a CI/CD pipeline that goes through a test before deploying to production. It's very important that before deploying sort of a new model for, sort of these use cases that could end up pretty bad if the model hallucinates in a bad way, making sure that there's at least some sort of, ground truth test set that has passing results before ever deploying an update, like deploying a production update to an LLM system.
A lot of good insights there. I want to go ahead and take a question from the audience. One is from Sebastian Scott. He says, are there certain industries or areas or domains in which hallucination is harder to contain? for example, in very technical or engineering-based areas? I'll just throw that open to the floor if anyone has any comments on that.
I'd say certainly for Ada right now, our customers are seeing a lot of success with our generative resolutions offering, integrating their knowledge-based content to automate customer service conversations in runtime using generative AI. We have yet to extend that or those capabilities to technical documentation, so that you can automatically resolve conversations that involve, let's say, developer docs. And I'd be curious if anyone else has any experience with this, but for our approach to that has been, we do recognize it's significantly different. And I think there's so I would say that, like, from our view today, to answer the question, like, I don't know if there's higher risk, but certainly the approach, anyone who's considering applying generative AI to the automation of technical documentation, I would encourage them to not assume that there's a one-size-fits-all approach, that anyone you're working with should have experience, should view that as a separate type of data set that warrants, that represents a separate set of problems than just text-based, knowledge-based data.
Mm-hmm. There's another question from the audience. I'm going to try clicking on it and see what happens. And it appears. That's awesome. How do you suggest your customers restructure their CS teams to account for utilizing large language models? Not so much agent shrinkage, but rather roles to support and analyze the data obtained. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I've got lots. Sorry to chime in again, but
no,
this is so much of what we do in partnership with our customers. So our customers follow what we call the ACX framework. That's the Automated Customer Experience Framework. And what that framework does is it transforms your organization from being agent first to being AI first. And it takes you through, our customers follow through 3 key phases in facilitating that transformation, which I can go into in greater detail if it's of interest. But to answer the question directly, there are typically 3 significant changes that are made to the CS organizations as a result of AI. The first is there's a lot of promotions that happen. So our customers typically promote their top performing customer service agents out of their support center or contact center into a new AI customer experience role, or ACX role. It's a new team that is staffed. Their job is to improve the quality of their AI over time, improve the impact of their AI on their customer service over time. And that's a really exciting new career trajectory to become an ACX manager, for example. The second change we often see is a transition from folks who are in the contact center into new advocacy roles. Everyone may have seen IKEA pursue this strategy relatively recently, where they reskilled hundreds of agents to become design consultants. And the reason this is significant to organizations is because these new advocates are now adding revenue to the organization, or spending more time with customers to improve their lifetime value or reduce their churn. And then the third shift we typically see are more in line with reshaping the overall investment in customer service operations as it becomes much more AI native, and as it starts to inform more of the business strategy as a whole. And that's where we see investments in reskilling, where customer service teams become much more data literate and much more business oriented. Their data is now being employed to inform core company strategy. And that's typically a very exciting sort of movement we see inside our customers, as customer service becomes more and more important because of AI, and increasingly becomes a hub inside their companies because of how they're working with AI.
Hmm. Does anyone else want to throw any comments into this? It's really interesting. I had a conversation with a friend, Brian Jeppesen, who leads customer support at Landry's. And he was talking about when he introduced conversational AI. He's a big advocate of a brand called Poly AI. If you follow him on LinkedIn, you already know that. And he's very vocal about it. And he talks about when they implemented conversational AI in the voice support context, and that was pre-ChatGPT, right? This was before this whole hallucination concept came up. But they saw a reduction in attrition by 50%, which is pretty remarkable. And he attributes that to two things. One, he did not need quite as many agents. Of course, he still has a contact center. They're still fully operational, but he didn't need quite as many. And the agents he was able to reduce was the 25% of agents that were the most likely to churn. And a good point he made is that an average, contact center operation may have 100% attrition over the course of a year, but it's not 100% of your agents turning over in a 12-month period. It's 25% of your agents turning over 4 times. And then secondly, he was able to allow the robots to handle the more mundane, basic, frequently asked questions and allow all those calls to get out of the queue so the customers have shorter waits who have the actual more serious questions. And those tended to be more of the revenue generating activities because they had some type of compensation scheme where agents could be compensated through generating revenue. And of course, they were happier and were now earning more money to be doing all that. So that's just my 2 cents on that.
I have maybe one more point on that. So okay. I think a really great point about making the agent's life easier. So, I think, a big part of this conversation has been using the LLMs as sort of like a chatbot for self-service use cases in customer support. But LLMs can actually be used for a lot of different things. For example, being able to automate certain workflows that, speed up some internal operations. For example, in teams that are dealing with customer support tickets, being able to auto draft, personalized emails, for those to be reviewed, auto generate tickets, try to use the LLM to extract information from customer conversations and use that to autofill CRM entries that may be missing. These are all things that can be accomplished utilizing the LLMs and actually, make agents' lives easier and more productive. Yeah.
Very good. I'm going to keep moving on. Is a question I've got, and I'll address this to Samir, is the topic of context. And so I've read one of Humanfirst employees, Copus Grayling, am I pronouncing his name correctly, Greg? He's a hero of mine. I try to read everything he puts out online. And he wrote an article about reducing hallucination through providing additional context to the large language model. And I'm curious to what extent there's a capability to provide large language models with additional context from the customer's experience with that brand. For example, if you have data about what websites that customer was viewing immediately prior to initiating the conversation with the bot, or maybe if you have the purchase history or things of that nature. Do any of your companies, I can open this up, but how do you use that information?
Yeah, I think that's a great topic. The conversation alone is just one isolated instance of, what a customer might be calling about. But there might be some added context and information that helps guide the LLM to produce better responses. But that information is not self-contained in the conversation. You might have to retrieve that information from, external resources like, CRMs or past conversations, or even external events that are going on in the area or zip code of where the customer might be calling in from. And so these are sort of like all external data sources that can be connected and used by the LLM if set up appropriately. And that's one of the things that we're enabling with Flair Labs, with Flair Studio, is being able to make all these connected data sources to retrieve all the relevant context and therefore improve, the overall result that an LLM might provide, being able to have access to the full context from the customer.
Mm-hmm. Does anyone else have additional thoughts on that, Liz?
I guess we think of it less as reason less for reducing hallucinations and more for resolving ambiguity, right? So like a really tangible example of this is a digital subscription service we work with. And a customer might write in and say something like, unsubscribe me, right? But are they asking to be unsubscribed from a mailing list, or are they asking to be unsubscribed from their subscription to your digital media service, right? And in cases like that, including information that's really tactical, like account status, whether there's an active subscription, things like that are easy adds where we'll look at a vector with, we've got the embedding, but then we'll have additional points of information that allows you to really resolve that without having to go back to the customer again to clarify before knowing with a greater likelihood whether they're asking for the mailing list and subscribe or a digital subscription and subscribe. So it's really things like that perhaps a human agent would naturally be looking at that you want to feed in as context to a model to really aid in comprehension.
Yeah, I just to build on that, Liz, like I think context is absolutely everything. And it's actually through AI's ability to understand really complex context that most people are going to see the tipping point happen in customer service, where they really start to see how AI-powered experiences truly exceed what humans alone are capable of. And I'll give you an example of this. Like broadly, as the world transitions to customer service that is 100% all interactions automatically resolved by AI, the way that this shift is mostly happening is it's happening away from a present world today where most businesses force their customers to conform to their rules. The average customer has to talk to a business, in the business's language of choice, in the channels that the business offers, in the language that the business speaks, at the time of day that the business wants you to a world in which it's customer driven. A customer, the business meets the customer where they are. The business speaks to the customer, in the language that they speak, at the time of day that they want, in the channel of their choice. And so, Samir, you touched upon like external data sources. Absolutely. I think, like AI enables your brand to have deployed properly perfect memory with regards to every customer interaction that you have. But it goes far beyond that to customize your interaction for the time of day, the channel, the objective of the brand. And a core thing that we are enabling our customers to layer on is the coaching roles that you have as a brand. Like increasingly, I think when we think about AI control, we think about it in terms of coaching. A good example, very simple example of this might be a customer of ours will go inside Ada. They'll see that they automatically resolved a conversation, let's say in Quebec, Canada. And their bot greeted their customer, said, "Hey, Greg, I'm ready to help you. I'm going to help you reset your password. I'm going to help you refund your package." But inside our application, they're able to coach their AI to say, "Hey, next time you greet a customer who's based in Quebec, say bonjour, Greg, or say salut, Greg, instead." And it's the ability to store that coaching and to ensure that the AI coach never has to say that again, so that every other user who's contacting the brand from Quebec, they're always going to have the same experience that is referenced or coached by the ACX organization, the AI coaching organization. That's where I think we're going to start to see the real relationship between the amount of context AI is able to understand and the quality of experience that's ultimately offered.
All right, so I've got a question that says from Brendan Chen: can chaining LLMs for discrete tasks with frameworks like LangChain help with hallucinations, context, or memory issues in CS interactions, customer support interactions. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. So the question is related to whether you can take the output from one LLM and feed that as the input to another LLM and sort of have this chain of LLMs that finally produce the final answer. And I think that's a really great question. There's been a lot of sort of this state-of-the-art research that shows that by chaining LLMs together, you can get higher and better accuracies for various tasks. For example, solving math problems is one example, and there's various others. But I think the real trick here is that every task is very custom. It's not like there's not one size fits all. Just by chaining LLMs together doesn't necessarily mean it's better than a single LLM with a prompt, with a well-engineered prompt. So the main takeaways here is that really what's important is being able to test out all of these different strategies and be able to sort of very easily swap out configurations of the LLM where you're testing now, hey, if I use a chain of LLMs versus I use just a prompt template that I've engineered, how are those affecting the outputs and results of the model that we're looking to deploy? And having those tuning levers and tools to just easily be able to do that is quite important.
Hey, do you guys think that chaining's even going to be a thing as context windows continue to grow?
I kind of agree with what Samir here said, that I think people use chaining initially because it's easy to break things down and to do very finite things in each step. But I think that's because it's fundamentally hard to kind of build a single prompt, for example, that works really well. All right, so you kind of break it down. But I think once tooling, and that's what we're out to solve at Humanfirst, and I think also what Flair is doing, is to help kind of get much higher trust in a single prompt and make sure it guarantees that it works across large scale data. So I think there's cases where chaining is probably necessary, or for, again, as Samir said, like use cases where it's nothing that you want to repeat, like, for example, autonomous agents. Like there we're talking about kind of a reason or chain of thought that requires you to kind of prompt an LLM at each step. But for repeatable use cases, I personally think that we're going to get to a stage where we can, probably solve a lot of the problems with a single prompt that's been really well fine-tuned, and that we can guarantee that it works across all data. And there's advantages to that in terms of latency and in terms of kind of overall experience. And also, if we consider that there's hallucinations that, regardless, we'll never be able to completely reduce them. When you're introducing multiple, generation steps, you're kind of compounding then the risk of hallucinations at each one of those steps.
Yeah, I think it requires you to be really specific and aware of what you're trying to optimize for at each step, right? Because yes, there are smaller models that are much higher latency that will be better at the beginning if you're trying to categorize and then feed it on. But the other thing we actually think a lot about is prompt engineering. One way to look at prompt engineering is trying to fit yourself to the very specific quirks of specific models. And that does become a bit of an onerous task, and it makes it harder to switch out models at different points if you spend a lot of effort on that prompt engineering. Whereas for us, we actually do break apart and chain different models, which allows us to then be a little bit more flexible in where we swap out different models.
Very good. Well, thank you all for your time today. We've come up on our limit, and I just really appreciate all of you putting in the thoughts and the time to make this happen. And I really want to invite all of you to have a more detailed one-on-one long-form discussion about what you're doing at your organizations that we can put on the CX, AI, and Outsourcing podcast. Because I could have gone on for an hour with each of you based on the things we've talked about today, and it's very fascinating. And thank you everyone for your questions and for tuning in. But until next time, thank you all for participating. I'm about to shut it down now. Really appreciate you all.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, everybody. This was lots of fun. Take care.
Take
Bye.
care.
Thanks,
Bye.
folks.